Marginal product is the additional product that we get for one more unit of input. Now, let's talk about marginal product of capital. What we mean here is that if we hold everything else constant, which in this case is labor and technology is always constant in this basic model we deal with. If we hold labor constant, how much more output we're going to get by increasing physical capital one more unit. So assume I'm a teacher, I'm working right now. How much more education I can provide to my students if I had, let's say, one more tablet or a brand new tablet or a faster laptop, more physical capital, more tools, more equipment. That's marginal product of capital. Now, how do we find it? By finding the slope of the production function with regard to that input we're looking for. The slope of the production function with regard to physical capital. As the capital stock increases, the product, a marginal product of capital declines. This is the decreasing marginal product law, the diminishing marginal product law. So this is how we show it. Let's say this is our production function. We need to take the derivative of this production function. Y equals 0.2 times K (0.3) power and some constant number for labor. Let's call this L bar. This is constant, okay? L bar is constant. This is not a function. Now, what's the derivative of this function? Or what's delta y, delta k, if delta k is unit? If you remember, power becomes a multiplier, 0.3 k, now minus 1 on the power, which is minus 0.7, multiplied by that constant, which is 0.2 L bar. This is how you take a derivative from an exponential function, if you remember from your math. It's a formula. I'll put some formulas on the Moodle if you need. So now we have the function of the slope. If you increase this k, this is a negative power. So basically, negative power means k is now on the denominator, or in other words, our function is point 3 multiplied by 0.2 L bar divided by k power 0.7. Do we all understand this? Negative power is the denominator of the function. So as you increase k, the denominator would go up. Therefore, the function itself, the output of the function, will go down. As you increase capital, the amount of extra output you get from that capital goes down. It can also be shown here on the production function itself. When capital, let's call this axis K, and this is Y. This is the output axis, and this is the physical capital axis. When you're here, your workers, they don't have any tools. So if you just give them the most basic, the cheapest tools, little physical capital, their output will go up by a lot. They will start working. Now they can't work. Before you give them tools, they can't work. When you give them tools, they can work. Their output would go up by a lot. But as you give them more advanced tools, more expensive tools, their output would go up, but not that much compared to the first step. So this is important. Just know it. I may give you a question on the exam about this. Just make sure how you can just make sure you know how to take a derivative from these functions. This constants, you may have to like use a calculator to find the final answer for me, or you may just treat them as a constant. So, any questions?
Could you go over the derivatives again from
Oh, yeah.
constant where you got 0.2L constant and
yeah, this is too messy. I'm just gonna you can keep it so that you can watch on YouTube and pause it again. I'm gonna open a new one. First, let's use a very simple function. Y equal x2. What's the derivative of this function?
2x.
2x, yes. Delta y over, call this like this, it's better. Power becomes a multiplier, 2 times multiplied by x power minus 1. X power 2 minus 1, which is 1. So that's 2x. Now this is the rule to take a derivative for of these kinds of functions. Now let's talk about a Cobb-Douglas production function. You have a bar, which is the constant. This is just a number. It doesn't change. Technology, you have k multiplied by 0.3 multiplied by, again, L bar. This also is a number. It's just a constant. If you want to take the derivative, it'll be those constants, which will be left as a multiplier. That's multiplied by power, just like x2, 0.3 multiplied by k power minus 1. 0.3 minus 1 is minus 0.7. Now, when we say something is minus, something's power, some numbers has a power of minus something, that means this is exactly like I divide this part with k power 0.3. In other words, again, let me keep this so later you can watch on YouTube. Now, you hold this. These two are the same. X power minus 2 is equal to 1 over x power 2. Minus power is the same as power when it's on the denominator. So y equal a bar L bar multiplied by 0.3 K minus 0.7 is equal to A bar L bar multiplied by 0.3 divided by K power 0.7. So K here is the denominator of this function. As you increase the denominator of a function, of a fraction, the result would go, if you hold the denominator constant and you increase the denominator, the result would go down. Yes. This is the diminishing marginal product. This is why if you keep giving tools to your workers, constantly giving them better tools, a better equipment, the return you get will go down.
And L stands for labor, right?
Yes.
What does
L
A
is,
stand for?
what is what?
A stand for?
A stands for total factor productivity or technology. Like how efficient, how experienced you are in doing something. Remember that example I used? Like assume I have given this class 35 students, one laptop, one tablet, and around 75 minutes to teach. More than like 80 minutes to teach. Or 90 minutes to teach. 90 minutes to teach, which is this class time. Now, same time, same equipment, but different teacher. Instead of me, a young, relatively inexperienced person, let's bring in an old professor who has been teaching economics for 40 years. Who will use that same time and same equipment more efficiently? The old experienced professor or the inexperienced PhD student?
The older gentleman?
The older gentleman, exactly. This is what A represents. A represents technology, experience, efficiency, all of that, total factor productivity.
That's in the slides, right? Where it says that.
Pretty sure it is. We had a discussion on total factor productivity, labor productivity, and chapter 2, I guess. This is chapter 2.
I actually think I saw it on chapter 3 slides.
On chapter
slide
3?
8, I believe.
This is slide 8, chapter 3. This is the Douglas function. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is somewhere. I've already taught this, total factor productivity. And there are some curves that show, if you remember, comparing economics with different countries with each other, like United States, Japan, and then we say total factor productivity is the most important part of the economy. Do you remember that?
I remember that. But it's technology, efficiency.
Yeah.
And what else?
Like technology, efficiency, and experience. These are total factor productivity. It's like everything that makes a firm or a country or even a person more efficient. culture also. Some people say it's also culture. But you don't need to worry about it because it will always be a constant number in the models we deal with at this level. This is very strange. Yeah, this is total factor productivity. You see, these are different countries, United States, Japan, and this is what I said when I said total factor productivity is the most important part of an economy. The shortfall of per capita income in other countries relative to the United States is due more to lower productivity than it is to lower amounts of capital per person. This is why I talked about the importance of technology and efficiency and like experience, education, and all of that. So yeah, talked about the functions, the derivatives. What else we didn't talk about? And we also talked about shocks. MPK, marginal product of capital. This is again the same as that derivative, the derivative we took. Now, we also have MPL, marginal product of labor. When we want to talk about marginal product of labor, we do the exact same thing we did to capital. Just in this case, we take the derivative of production function with respect to L. We consider A as a constant, and we consider K as a constant, but we take the derivative of L. Take the derivative of this, which would be minus 0.3 multiplied by 0.7. Again, this is a minus, so it goes on the denominator, and the same things that we talked about with K. It would be 0.7 multiplied by A bar, a constant number, K bar, another constant number, divided by L power 0.3. So as this goes up, the output of this function goes down. This is the diminishing marginal product of labor. Example, right now I'm teaching. If you bring one more teacher, he or she can help me with probably the slides or writing on the board, things like that. Efficiency would go up. If you bring in another teacher, that person could probably wait until we're like tired and replace me. I can take a 5-minute break or something. I don't know. Efficiency would go up by a little bit. Output will go up by a little bit. But if you bring in like 10 more teachers to teach this class, efficiency and output will not go up that much. I mean, it won't go up at all at some point. At some point, when you're here, one more unit of input will only cause bare minimum of the output measure. And this is very important. This is why economics is such an important thing. Like why we have unemployment. Why do companies just hire more workers? If more workers, more production, why don't we just hire more people? What's wrong with companies? Why do we have so many people unemployed? The reason companies won't hire workers and workers and workers to keep building things for them is because as they hire more workers, the return they get, the output they get goes down. And at some point, it won't make sense for them to hire one more person to pay him or her, because the pay that he or she is going to receive will be less than the price of whatever the worker is producing. So the company will be losing money. That's why we have unemployment. This diminishing marginal product is a very important law. Yeah, very important rule in economics. Yeah, we talked about national income. We talked about this, real labor income plus real capital income. United States was the I was number one in this area. Yeah. Analysis of shocks. As I said, I used the example of COVID, but as you can see here, analysis of shocks can help us explain why, for example, wages fall and the stock market prices fall after the US economy experienced an oil price hike, an increase in oil prices in the last 35 years. Why? Because when oil prices go up, costs of doing business would go up. In other words, everything you do, you need gas. If you want to drive to work, you need to put gas in the car. If you want to, I don't know, fly to another country, you need gas, a special airplane gas in the plane. All companies, trucks, tractors, they all need gas. So when oil prices go up, gas prices would go up, therefore less profits would come back to factories and firms and businesses. Less profits means less stock market returns. And of course, when companies are not making that much profit, they will start to have a lower demand for labor. They don't need that many people to work for them. Therefore, workers will lose their negotiating power. Their supply is the same, but their demand fell, therefore the price would fall. Therefore, their wages would go down. Wages are the price for labor. What's my wage? What's my salary? It's after I negotiate with the university, for example. I say, okay, you need this teacher, so that's demand. I'm willing to work, that's supply. But then you need me a lot, so you have to pay me a lot. I don't need you that much. I can go work for somewhere else. So you have, like, I have a much stronger negotiating position. I'm at a much stronger negotiating position. Therefore, you have to pay me a bigger salary. Or they could say, you can only work for us because you're our student, but we can hire anybody we want. So now we are the strong party and we're going to pay you a lower salary. This is supply and demand. And these like oil shocks, COVID pandemic, and also climate change, these are all like shocks that we're experiencing, and economists are using supply and demand analysis to explain the changes and try to predict the future so that companies can better prepare themselves. Yeah. This is also, but this is very important. Is real labor income and real capital income. Real labor income for one person, it's marginal product of labor at equilibrium point. If you remember, we talked about, we assume that the economy is at equilibrium. At equilibrium, when everything is balanced, when everyone has already found a job, when companies have already found their customers and the economy is balanced, your salary would be exactly equal to what your contribution to the company is. They will exactly pay you how much you're contributing to the economy, how much you're producing in this company. Your rent on capital, if you, for example, if you own a piece of land that a company has rented from you, or if you own a tractor and you rented this tractor to a farmer, the rent you receive for that would be exactly equal to the contribution. of that piece of equipment, of that piece of land, of that capital in production. So everyone will get exactly the amount that he or she is contributing or producing. Total labor income would be when you divide the amount of every single person contribution or production with the entire population of the labor force. So in total, how much how much the labor force in total has produced at equilibrium would be equal to their labor income, their total income. The same for capital. Now, national income would be real labor income plus real capital income. That's the total income of a nation. There are people who own lands, people who own equipment, people who own capital, physical capital, and there are people who own their labor. People who own, for example, people who are teachers, who are engineers, who are truckers, who are farmers, people who work. And of course, there are people who are a combination of both. You may be a teacher or an engineer or a farmer, and at the same time, you may have some stocks, the ownership of some company, you may have some physical capital, some plot of land, some like equipment, tractor. Perfect example for this are family farms. Family farms are farmers who own their own land, and they work on their own land, and also family farms have off-farm income. For example, your spouse may be a teacher at the local high school, or you could be an engineer working for a company, but also having your own land. This is a combination of both. Your labor income is your wages from where you're working at, and your capital income is your return from investing your capital in some business, that plot of land that you farm. Put them all together, you'll have national income, the entire total income of a nation. A family farm is a very a good model, very simple model to demonstrate a nation. The family farm has its own farm, its own plot of land, physical capital, which gives them profit, which gives them money, and they can also work outside of the farm. They can work for the local school, a company nearby, anywhere, and they will get wages, they will get labor income. So, explaining real wage growth.
Does W stand for labor or capital?
W stands for wages. This is like wage of labor. If you
About R?
I couldn't hear you.
What about R?
Yep. Let me W multiplied by L equals marginal productivity of labor multiplied by L. Now, if you divide both sides by L, W equals marginal product of labor, or as we talked about, derivatives of Y with respect to L at equilibrium point, at that equilibrium point. This W stands for wage. R stands for rent, marginal product of capital at equilibrium. call this equilibrium point. Now, the way to find this, I really don't want to make it complicated. This is why I'm just talking and not doing the math behind it, because it's like a summer course, undergraduate level. I don't want to make this too complicated. But the way to find this is that we assume we're at equilibrium and companies are trying to maximize their profit. How do you maximize a function? Anybody remember how do we maximize a function? You take the derivative of a function and put it equal to 0. Then you find the amount of that value that makes the function be equal to 0. Now, if this is a function with 2 inputs, so you have both capital and labor, you have to take a side derivative. This is very difficult. Like it could take you complicate things a lot for you. So I won't ask you to do it. But after you find that value, you put it equal to 0, just like a normal function. You find the the optimal values for labor and capital, and then you'll find the optimal marginal product of labor and capital. At that point, you will see that it can be mathematically proven that W at equilibrium or wage would be equal to the contribution of labor. And rent or return on capital would be equal to the contribution of capital. This is the mathematics behind this is tough, but think about this. At equilibrium, companies have already hired everyone. Everything is working perfectly fine. The system, it's not equal, but it's fair. It's completely fair because we're at equilibrium. We're at the long term. It's completely fair. In a fair situation, you'll get exactly how much you contributed. No one is going to work hard and get nothing. You work hard, you contribute a lot, your marginal product of labor would be a lot, therefore your wage would be a lot. And if you think about it, it makes sense, because if they don't pay you what you deserve, you will go work for someone else. Companies compete to hire you. And if you are producing a lot, your marginal product of labor is a lot, companies compete. They offer you better salaries. When you're on, for example, when you're on the job market, you will see that companies will give you different offers. Now, if you're an established professional, if you have a very strong resume, if you have a very high GPA, companies will offer you more money because they think your marginal product of labor would be higher. You'll be contributing more to their company. This is why the students working hard for their GPA to be really high. Why? Because after you graduate, if you have a really good GPA, companies will see your resume and they say, you know what? This person's marginal product of labor is very high. Therefore, we're going to pay him more money. We're going to give him a better offer. And the same exists for capital. If you, for example, if you own a car rental or like a car rental business, if you have like a Porsche or a Lamborghini or a Ferrari to offer people for, let's say, 2 nights or 3 nights of rent, and you have like a 1985 Toyota Corolla, who's going to get a bigger rent, the Ferrari or the Corolla? The Ferrari. If your capital is better, the return you get on your capital will be better. these can be proved with math, but it's too complicated for this level right now. So just stick to common sense and theory and supply and demand for that. Okay, we talked about everything. I think we covered all of it. Yeah. Let's move to chapter 4. Any questions from chapter 3 before we move on? No questions? Am I making sense?
Yes.
Thank you. If I'm not making sense, make sure you ask. If you don't get any something, make sure you ask. So let me take attendance. Serve as a break for those of you who are very tired from my endless talk of chapter 3. Brandon Atkins, Noah Albertson,
Here.
Adel Al-Ghamdi,
Here.
Devin Ammon,
Here.
Alex Battistoni,
Here.
Andrew Battistoni,
Here.
Jessica Beltrani,
Here.
Danny Blakeman, Corey Bowles,
I'm here.
Megan Candow, Brandon Cosia Di Ferro,
Here.
James Dominguez,
Here.
Yossi Escobar,
Here.
William Franzoni,
Here.
Seth Freeman,
Here.
Prem Gandhi, Tristan Gwen,
Here.
Emily Horn,
Here.
Todd Howard,
Here.
Xiao Hu,
Here.
Nupur Jain,
Here.
Karina Jordan, Eric Kalberg, Karina Jordan, got you. Eric Kalberg, Fei Lei,
Here.
Abhishek Manhas,
Here.
Bobby McGraw,
Here.
Jose Mejia,
Here.
Jacob Morai,
Here.
Matthew Goyen,
Here.
Ansley Paris,
Here.
Abby Pandagraph,
Here.
Harry Saunders, Will Tibbles, Huey Wong.
Here.
Thank you very much. So let's.
I joined the class late, so I don't know if I'm on the roll call list, but I'm here as well.
Who's in? What's your name?
Parker Pearsall.
Order.
Parker.
Parker, right? Parker, is that you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Parker Pearson. Yep. Got it. Did you like are you a late register or something?
Yeah, remember how I emailed you and I registered late during the semester?
Ah, yeah. That's my bad. Forgot. Yep. Got it.
I joined last week sometime.
Yeah. So don't worry about your previous absence. That's all right. Now, okay. Now let's talk about chapter 4, saving and investment. If you remember, we talked about a portion of the economy is saving. We save money, we invest it. What is saving and investment? It's like some people say it's like the basic thing in a civilization. Assume you're a farmer. You have, let's say, 1 sack of grain. You can eat some of it. You can make bread from the grain and eat it. And you can plant it on your land. How do you find how much grain to plant and how much grain to eat? It depends on you. You want to maximize your life fulfillment. First of all, you need to eat something. If you don't eat anything, you will starve and perish. So consumption can never be zero. You must at least eat some of it, just the bare minimum. You like be very hungry, but then you're planting the rest of your grain in the ground, and you'll be given a lot of harvest next harvest season. Or you may decide that this land that I have, it's useless. If I put more grain in it, nothing would come out. It's a drought, or I don't know, something horrible, like the soil itself is not really fertile. So I'm going to eat all of my grain myself. Invest none. Or you may say, I have already harvested. I have already planted seeds into this soil. This land, this farm is already planted. There is no point for me to plant even more grain in the ground. So I'm just going to eat my grain and enjoy a bigger diet. This very simple situation is exactly what's happening right now in the world, in countries, between nations, companies, individuals. You thinking with yourself, am I going to start like studying for this exam, or do I go to party? Do I go out, enjoy my 4th of July fireworks? That depends on the situation. Is the exam approaching and you really need a good grade on it? Then you don't go, and you will not have like fun and enjoy yourself. You will stay home and study hard. But if there is no exam, or the exam in like 2 weeks, you may decide to study. That also depends. This law of investment and saving also exists in our personal lives, in a sense that, am I going to college to get a degree, like a master degree in engineering? That will cost me this much money. I have to pay tuition. You will calculate all of this, and I won't go to work. So I have to also lose some income from not going to work, and all of this and this and this. You add them together, but then what's the return? after I finish school, I go to work, my salary will be way higher. I can make that kind of money. I can make all of the money that I spent back in like 2 years. Then yes, I will go. Or you will be like, okay, I have a job. I'm making money. Do I leave my job and go back to the school to study? I don't know, like a less high demand major. After I study, no one will hire me, so I will not be making any more money. And I have to pay all the debts and I lose money. So no, I won't go. This choose of whether to invest or save or consume and spend exists in personal lives. It exists for companies. For example, Apple Corporation a few years ago, they decided they have already invested enough, so they're not going to invest more money into their company. Instead, they just paid cash dividends to all their stockholders. They said, you know what, guys, we don't have any idea how to spend your money and make more money for you. So we're just going to give it back to you. You go and spend it on whatever you want. This is your money. We're not going to spend it and invest it. You just go and spend it yourself. Or it could be, for example, Tesla Corporation. They're expanding. They're opening up a new plant here, a new factory there, a new office here. They're investing. It's all because of the expected future income, the expected future profits. If something is a good investment, you'll do it. If something looks like a bad investment, you won't do it. It also exists among countries. Remember the farmer I said? If the farmer's land is already planted, if the country is already rich, like the United States, there is no more need to not consume and spend like more on investment. You will just eat your grain. You've already planted the land. This is why United States has a much higher consumption compared to China. China is a growing economy, a developing economy. They're still planting their farms. There is a lot of land they need to plant. But United States, they say we already planted, so we consume. That's why their consumption rate is higher. Rich countries, consumption rate higher. Developing countries, investment rate is higher. So that's just a background to begin talking about one of the most important decisions for people, firms, corporations, and countries. Relationship between saving and wealth. A person's wealth is the amount of her or his assets, everything that the person has, minus their liabilities, whatever they owe to other people. Imagine you, let's say you're a college student. You have a laptop. It can be sold $1,000 for $1,000. You have some clothes and a backpack and other things. It'll be around $500. And you also owe $200 to your friend. How much is your wealth as a college student? Let's find out. $1,000 laptop, $500 clothes, backpack, equipment, everything else. And you also owe $200 to your friend. What's your total wealth? Your total assets is $1,500 everything that you have, your laptop plus all the clothes, all the stuff that you have, everything you have, $1,500 in total. That's your total assets. Your liabilities, 200. This is the 200 that you owe your friend, so you have to pay him back. In total, your wealth would be 1,300. Assets minus liabilities. This is how we find a person's worth. Have you ever heard, like they say, that celebrity, he's like, his net worth is like $100 million. That's how we talk about like celebrities' worth, or I don't know, like athletes, like that famous, like Cristiano Ronaldo, the famous real football player or soccer player, as you call it. I just had to make that joke. Well, Cristiano Ronaldo, for example, he has $100 million of assets minus $1 million of liability or debts to other people. Therefore, he has his total worth or wealth is $99 million. Am I making sense? Am I making sense here? Assets, everything you own minus liabilities, everything you owe people.
So does that mean that the US has like a negative wealth because of like all the debt we owe?
That's a very interesting question. But when it comes to countries, the answer is not that like simple, especially when it comes to the United States. Let me tell you, let me ask you something. What would the world look like without the United States?
Probably wouldn't look too good.
So you got your answer. When it comes to governments, the situation is different. They have this expected wealth that they can demonstrate. If we don't exist, what happens? And of course, this gets out of hand because governments try to over push that card that they have, that we're the government, the world depends on us, especially big countries. So that's a very complicated argument, way above my pay grade. But I tell you what, United States is far, far away from bankruptcy. This is the term we use, bankruptcy. When your assets is lower than your liabilities, you're bankrupt. This is when we say, for example, I went bankrupt. That means if I sell everything I have, I would not still be able to pay back all my liabilities, to pay back all the loans I took, all the debts I have, everything. That's when you call a government or a country or a company or a person bankrupt. Bankruptcy means assets is smaller than liabilities. And United States is it's like a far, like probably further than any other country on earth because of what United States can bring to the table. They bring on the table a world which still works. If the United States doesn't exist, probably the world would be like, I would go to Mars. I tell you what, I will go to Mars. I will ask Elon Musk to take me with him. I'm just joking. But that's a very serious argument. And right now it's gaining, especially right now, it's gaining importance because not only United States, other countries are, because of COVID crisis, they're taking debt and debt and debt, like taking loans. Their liabilities is going up and up and up, while their assets at best remains constant, and at worst, because of all the GDP growth in the negative because of COVID, it's going down and down. So for United States will be fine, but other countries, very scary situation. If some nations go into bankruptcy, countries may decide to flee from bankruptcy by starting crazy wars. For example, one theory is that World War II started because Nazis were almost defaulting on their debts. They took all those loans to finance their rearmament and to run their economy without actually having an efficient and open market economy. They just took loans and loans and loans. And because they couldn't pay back the loans, they started attacking this country, this country, this country to take them, like Czechoslovakia, this here, this there. And at one point, they said, okay, we need to invade Poland. They invaded Poland and war broke out. World War II started. So this is very dangerous for non-superpower countries. Superpowers, they will help each other because they really need each other. For smaller countries, what you said, very frightening. They could start wars or do something to get out of paying their debts. National wealth of a country is a country's holding of assets, everything the country has, minus its liabilities. For example, in Venezuela, the government almost defaulted on its debts. So what happened was that the country couldn't pay back all the debt they owe to others. So they decided in exchange for their debts, they gave their assets, their oil, Venezuelan oil company. They gave it to another company. So another country, they said that we're happy to pay you your debts and help you in exchange for your oil company. And also there is a thing which is called debt trap. Many countries around the world, they are offered very lucrative and very nice loans by other countries, but then they cannot pay them back. So what happens is that then these countries would have to give up on their assets. For example, you can have this port, you can have the right to fish in this sea, you can have the right of owning this island, everything. You have the right to build a military base here. Assets minus liabilities, government debts, loans governments take all over the world. A country with a higher saving rate will accumulate national wealth over time. If a country has a higher saving rate, therefore lower consumption, over time, they will have more wealth and more wealth and more wealth. The example I used was China. China's economy is growing rapidly. Their consumption low, their investment very high. That's why in the last 10 years, they grew a lot more richer than compared to, for example, India. India's consumption too high or very high, depends on their own government, compared to China, very high, investment very low compared to China. Therefore, in the last 10 years, India didn't have the same increase in wealth and accumulation of wealth as China. High saving rate, more national wealth over time. Now, as we talked about, we have private saving, and like all those saving and investment decisions, they apply to people, companies, and governments. Let's talk about private saving. What do we mean by private? By private, we mean anything that is not owned by the government. Private can be one person. I am a private entity. I can be considered a business. I am a teacher. I work. I get paid. I'm like a business. I can have a brand here, advertise myself on TV. Like, do you need your economic course taught? Pay me and I will teach it. Or private could be a company. Let's say a privately owned college. Is Duke privately owned or is it government owned? Like NC State, I think it's a state university, so it's owned by the government. But Duke University, I think, is privately owned. If a company, even a company as big as a university with like 10,000 students and so on, if it's owned by a private sector and by not by the government, it's the private. It's considered private. Everything in the economy not owned by the government, not the government, is private. We also assume that all the production in the country, in a Keynesian economy, all the production is from private saving. This is very important because many people say that like high taxes are like socialism and communism and things like that, but it's not. It's still capitalism because the production, all output, is coming from the private sector, not from the government. It's capitalism up until the point that this Y belongs to the public sector, at least to a very large degree. In a communist government, for example, in Soviet Union, the Y came from the government, but not here. What we're seeing here, output comes from private sector. Output comes from the teacher who is teaching right now. Output comes from the company who has like thousands and thousands of employees working for them. We're both private sector producing output. And we pay the government taxes. The government only receives taxes. So private disposable income is everything we're making by producing after we paid the government. We pay the government some taxes, okay, just be there, Mr. Government, so that you can probably do some good for us, hopefully. Here's your taxes, leave us alone, let us produce. After we paid the government taxes, whatever we have left is our disposable income. Y disposable is total Y, total production by the private sector, minus T, total taxes that goes into the government, net taxes. Taxes minus government transfers. For example, if I am receiving, let's say, a stimulus checks, that would be deducted from taxes because it's coming back into my pocket. It would be my disposable income. Or if I'm receiving bailouts, which is another form of stimulus paychecks, but for corporations, that is also deducted from taxes because it's coming back into the pockets of the private sector. So I have my disposable income. I paid the government. I made some money. I paid the government. Whatever is left belongs to me. It's now mine. I will decide what to do with this money. I am left, let's say, with $2,000 every month. I pay the government. What's left for me? It's $2,000. Now I get to make a decision. I have $2,000. What do I do with this? I can consume it or save it. As I said, consumption can never be zero. You need to eat something to survive. So consumption can never be zero. So I consume some of it. Whatever I have not consumed, I save. Y disposable is total Y minus T paid the government. This amount is also equal, after I pay the government, consumption plus saving. I consume some of it, I save the rest. Therefore, my savings will be equal to whatever I have not consumed. After I deduct all my consumption from my total disposable income, I will have my saving. This is the remaining value, my saving. Y minus T, it's the same as YD, disposable, minus C, saving for private sector. The private sector, my saving, company saving, not the government saving. Now, private saving rate is the proportion of the total output, the total disposable income that goes towards saving. This basically says how many cents I save from $1 of disposable income. This shows what kind of person I am. Am I an altruistic person? Do I look to the future, or I live in the moment? This can be shown by my saving rate. Save private divided by YD. So if I make $2,000 and I save, let's say, $500 every month, my saving rate is equal to $25, 25%. This means from every dollar from every $1 that I make, I save 25 cents. Another person receives the same income every month, 2,000. And saves like half of it, $1,000. That person's saving rate is 50%. This means from $1, from every $1 that that person is earning, its disposable income, he or she saves half of it. Saving rate much higher than me, for example, which is 25%. Therefore, that person is more altruistic. It's more future oriented. That person thinks about his or her future more than the other person. If you like, it depends on the culture as well. But like, for example, when I started working, my mom constantly was calling me like, you have to start saving money now. You have to start saving money. Don't spend all your money with your friends and everything. Save some money for your future. Be worried about your future. And I was like, no, Mom, I literally have a master's degree in like business administration. I know financial decisions. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. And then I spend all my money with my friends. So that's also like, depends on the person. Your saving rate, it depends on the person. Some people are more altruistic. Some people living in the moment. Depends on your age also. When you're young, when you're 22 years old, 24 years old, you live in the moment. But when you reach to like 50 years of age or 60 years of age, you start thinking about the future, even the future generation. You'll be thinking about your children or grandchildren. So this is also what drives the saving rate. And it also exists within countries. one thing that many people are talking about is a country's culture. What some culture are more altruistic, they're more future oriented, they save more money so that they can consume more in the future. Some other cultures, they believe in the quality of life. Then now let's enjoy it. In fact, I think in business administration, we had the cultural spectrum by Hoistede, and the future-oriented culture, the success-oriented culture, which focused on success to like end at the beginning, to win at the beginning, was called the masculine culture. And the feminine culture was more focused on like the current quality of life, to make life better now, to not to like to consume more. And we had like a feminine score for every country and a masculinity score for every country. And this has nothing to do with the whole like men versus women, but it was like a culture thing, which was very interesting. My wife did her master's thesis on the economic culture in the city of Tehran. And it was, the result was so like very interesting, how the culture changes over time. So saving rate depends on culture as well as other things. Now, you can see 3 measures of the saving rate in the United States. This is very nice. This basically shows which part of the country is saving how much of their disposable income. Private sector, it's saving in 2005, it's constantly going down because the country keeps getting richer and richer. But you can see, for example, in 1980s, it was like 10%. But the funniest thing is the government saving rate. The government saving rate, virtually non-existence. It's like even most of the time, it's in the negative recently. What does negative saving rate means? It means that I am not only spending everything I'm making, I'm also borrowing from others. For every $1 that I'm making, I'm also borrowing 10 cents. So I'm spending more than my income. As you can see, private sector only does that when there is a financial crisis, like 2008. When there was the Great Recession, the private sector was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? You have to start borrowing money just to stay afloat and not to like have to shut down our businesses. So they borrowed a lot of money from others. Instead of saving, they spent all their money disposable and started even borrowing from others. That's why their saving rate is in the negative. But the government, well, the government is living in the moment, spending everything they're making. So it's minus 10% is still in the negative. And I think COVID made it worse for everyone, not only the United States government, for every other government. Of course, this may look bad, but it's not that bad when you consider all the potential for growth when it comes to the government. So we're talking about healthcare here. We're talking about education here. We're talking about national defense. These are all policy discussions. Like the government keeping lots of people alive by paying them for healthcare and going in the negative will then result in all those people who were saved going back to work, making money and paying taxes, therefore contributing to the governments in the future, government in the future. Even if we don't care about all the humanity of the thing, of the whole healthcare and helping people out, it's economically feasible to provide certain services to your citizens sometimes. It's economically profitable because then they will later go back to work and pay you taxes. Or national defense. If I could show you the 1945 or like 40 during World War II, you would have seen that this was very negative because the country was constantly borrowing money. So, government saving. We talked about private people saving. Me and you, we save our money. Companies also save and invest. They could deposit their money in a bank, or they could invest it in a new factory. They could start a new, build a new plant. Now, governments also have this. They can save some of their money, or they can consume it. They can spend it on national defense, on healthcare services, on education services, and all the jobs of a government. Or they can invest it. For example, my master thesis, I worked on the Norwegian oil sector, Norges Bank. The Norwegian government, if I remember correctly, they own a sizable portion of their Norges Bank. So with their tax money, they didn't spend everything they were making on their own consumption. Instead, they invested in their oil sector. So Norwegians, right now, Norway is one of the, I think it's the most richest country on earth, or one of the 2 or 3 richest per capita, because they invested a lot of money in oil. And they have, of course, they have a lot of oil reserves. So government didn't consume, spend all its income, all its tax money. Instead, they invested some of it in oil sector. Now, this look good on paper, but it's in fact very troubling. Why? Because it goes against one of the rules of free market economics. Government investment. Why do you need to invest? That's the job of the private sector. But many governments in the world do it. They make some money through taxation, and then they choose to whether consume it or invest it. This investment could also be giving loans to other countries. I give a loan to this country, for example, for 5% profit interest. This could be giving loans to companies. For example, the government wants to stimulate the growth of universities. The government then would give loans to universities, to people who want to start a university, to help them start a university. That's also government investment. The rest, government consumption. And governments are really good at consumption, trust me. They can always find somewhere to spend money for good or for bad. That's a different question. They could spend money on national defense, on education, on healthcare, everything. So government saving is all the money that the government has made from taxation. That's government's income source, taxation, minus all its consumption, whatever the government hasn't spent yet. When we talked about private saving rate or private savings in general, we said that private saving is equal to everything that they made by producing minus the taxes they pay to the government minus their consumption. And this part was called disposable income. These taxes, where does these taxes go? They go to the government. These taxes is the government's income, the government's disposable income, because the government also has to pay welfare checks and bailouts to companies. The government has to like pay back some of the money to the private sector. Whatever is left would be the government's disposable money, or T, net taxes. From this, the government can either consume some of it, buy new tanks or build new hospitals or schools, or save. Saving rate of a government, saving of the government saving is always equal to all the government's disposable income minus all its consumption. It's just like the private sector, but then private sector produces things, therefore its income is coming from production, from Y, but government produces nothing. Its income comes from T, taxes. Government's consumption, for simplicity, is also called government expenditure, from the GDP formula, if you remember, government expenditure. Now, have you ever heard the terms budget surplus or budget, excuse me, budget deficits? This is what it comes from. If the government's saving rate, I should stop saying saving. If the government's saving is bigger than 0, the government has a budget surplus. What does that mean? It means the government is making more money than it's spending. So it has disposable income. It has money to spend on saving. It can save some money for the dark days, or it can pay back all its loans that it took before. All of that. It can reduce its liabilities. That's what happens when government's income, taxes, is greater than all the government's expenditures. Last time this happened was in the 90s, during President Clinton's administration. The Soviet Union, America's biggest challenge, suddenly disintegrated, like vaporized, so it wasn't there anymore. And therefore, the US government didn't need to spend all that money on like nuclear weapons and all that, everything, all the money that was being spent. So they suddenly lowered all their spending by a lot. And their taxes was bigger than all their government expenditure. Therefore, they had budget surplus. Ever since then, we have been having budget deficit in the United States. And budget deficit, it's actually a much more natural thing than budget surplus. Budget surplus shouldn't really exist, because this could also mean overtaxation. Why are you taxing some people so much? You're not spending the money, get out, lower taxes. So budget deficit may look very scary, but in fact, budget surplus could be even scarier, because that means the government is just taking too much money from people, money that people themselves could invest or consume. And people always make better decisions than the government does, at least when you consider companies. So budget surplus Sometimes it's very good, sometimes it's very bad. Budget deficit, it's always bad, but sometimes it's not as bad as budget surplus. Budget deficit shouldn't exist. A budget should be always balanced. T should always be equal to G. But a budget deficit sometimes is more tolerable. It means that the government is at least not overtaxing the people. It's overspending, but not overtaxing people. People can still make decisions for their own money as much as possible. It's a very complicated argument, but the basic lies here. Whether T, tax income, is lower than consumption or government expenditure or not. Or in other words, is the government saving money, S greater than 0, or government is borrowing money, S lower than 0. Now, national saving, again, it's when you sum the savings of everyone in the nation, both private and the government. National saving is when you add everything together. Sum of private saving and government saving. Total Y, the total income of the government and the private sector, everybody, which is the total output of the economy, minus C minus G. This would be the total saving of a country. Now, I will prove this formula tomorrow. Today, we talked enough. Thank you very much, everyone. It's enough for today. I'll see you tomorrow. And I will also give you your homeworks today and probably some definitive information on your first midterm. If you have any questions, I can stay, we can talk. If not, see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have homework
Good
that has been assigned?
No,
For this
not
week?
yet. No, not for
Okay, thank you. All right, bye.
For the homework, is it usually due the end of week or we have homework every day?
Not every day. I will. That's actually why I took so long to give you your homework, is because I don't want everyday homeworks. I want
Okay.
like every week, because like some days you could, many students, some days they could like have an accident or an emergency, they wouldn't be
Right.
able to do their homework. So
Right. Awesome. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow, Professor.
see you.
Wait, Professor, I'm sorry. On the subject of homework, so has there been any homework assigned yet?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Today I will give you your first homework. I'm
Excellent.
planning
Thank
for
you.
weekly homework. So
Perfect. Thank you. Have a great day.
you too.